Chapter 2. The House Wins. Now, I don't know if I was out for an hour or a day or a month when I finally came to. My eyes wouldn't focus for the longest time, but I smelled leather. I heard the sounds of the city muffled outside and some instrumental music playing softly off somewhere. I was lying on my back, and my head pounded something fierce. I immediately began to mentally recount what had happened. Coming to the fact, as I've said, I didn't even want to go to that party anyway. So what did I do to deserve what was happening to me? My vision cleared, under protest it seemed, enough to let me look at where I was. I don't know why, but I expected something more sinister. Chains from the ceiling, concrete floors, water dripping off somewhere, bad lighting, and so forth. The reality was rather different. It was like an apartment, but more grand. Almost like one of those displays you see in high-end furniture stores, and all the best and most stylish decor and furnishings, but far too expensive and well-designed to be owned by any one residence. I craned my head around, seeing couches and ottomans all upholstered in richer tones of red and brown, placed on a deceivingly ornate woven cream carpet. I smelled leather because I was sprawled across a burnt orange suede leather chase in one corner of the space. Sunlight washed in through the blinds, casting bands of light along one full side, and some distance away I saw a young woman in a pink tank top and sweatpants behind a breakfast bar cutting up fruit. She was rather oblivious to me. I couldn't get a clear look because the light from the windows was doing a number on my retinas, but my first glance of her was rather flattering just the same. I sat bolt upright and she snapped her eyes towards me and then scampered off to another room. "Wait!" I shouted as I tried to stand, but found myself too shaky and promptly flopped back onto the chase. I heard voices and the young woman reappeared with a slightly older woman in tow. The older woman patted the younger on the shoulder and walked towards me smiling. She was attractive, I suppose, with that high-class power executive air about her. Her dark hair was kept at the back of her head by a tight bun. She wore a gray-skirted business suit and walked effortlessly on her high heels. The only odd thing about her appearance was that she wore very dark-fashioned sunglasses indoors, so I could only guess what the color of her eyes were. She glided in front of me and sat down on a nearby ottoman, and she pulled something like a smartphone out of her pocket and thumbed a few buttons before she began speaking. "Good morning, Mr. Buren. My name is Elle, and I'll be your liaison here." Her voice was serious and had a slightly French accent to it. I frowned, rubbed my face where I'd been bludgeoned, and began practically screaming, "Okay then, Elle, what the hell is happening? Where am I? Who are you? Oh yeah, and what the hell is happening?" So sue me for not being Mr. Cool under abduction. Elle, as she called herself, took a deep breath and put her phone, or whatever it was, back in her pocket. "I've called for fresh clothes, and your breakfast will be ready momentarily. Yvette was preparing a wonderful fruit salad and has squeezed fresh orange juice in accordance with your preferences." "What, no ice for the giant shiner I collected?" I barked, pointing at my swollen face. "Who are you people?" Elle moved from her seat on the ottoman and sat down next to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Sir, your questions will be answered in good time, but I suggest you take it slow. You have a big day ahead of you. You are not in danger or trouble, and we're not here to abuse you or anything threatening. And although you've no reason to do so, trust me, you want to be here." Her tone was just as I'd expect from a salesman, but that didn't make it less coercive. I stood up slowly, my legs finally obeying orders. Elle stood up with me, and we both walked to the breakfast bar I had seen the young woman at a few minutes ago. Elle poured me a glass of orange juice, which tasted like the nectar of the gods above, and called into a hallway. "Yvette, we're ready for breakfast." The same young woman came out of the hallway, although she had changed out of her pink pajamas and now wore a white skirt and shirt. Her eyes were bright electric blue, and her hair was raven black. I noticed her almost too hot shape as she curtsied and went back to her task as Elle continued. "This is Yvette. She will attend to your needs from now on anything you need. Just ask." I took in another eyeful of Yvette and shot my mouth off before I knew it. Well, I'm sure I could think of a few needs she could handle for me, and I put on a chauvinistic smirk as I said it. Yvette smiled back and with severe force chopped a banana clean in two with a harsh smack of her knife. "Yeah, pretty clear with the imagery then," I added. Although her accent was heavy French, I had no trouble putting together what Yvette said. "I am not a cheap slut. I am educated and well-read." "Fair enough, Yvette. Nice to meet you." I extended a hand over the bar, but she did not take it. Elle interrupted. "Sir, if you're done propositioning the help, we've a busy schedule today." I dug into a bowl of fruit salad Yvette placed in front of me and did my best to sidetrack Elle's obviously scripted attitude. So who's the big guy you sent to collect me, and do you treat all your guests to a complimentary kidnapping with their breakfast? If Elle was caught off guard by my candor, she didn't show it. An unpleasant but necessary means to achieve an objective, sir. He's a professional, and he wouldn't have harmed you any more than is absolutely necessary. I didn't like her answer, and I took another big bite of breakfast and thought for a second. Yvette cleared the counter and sat across from me. What am I doing here? I asked again. Elle looked to Yvette and then back to me. Yvette, get him ready downstairs in 20 minutes. Yvette said something in French, and Elle responded, also in French. Her tone sounded irritating, and then she switched to English so seamlessly I almost missed it. Relax, sir. It'll go much smoother that way. Although I'm sure she was being sincere, that phrase set off a big, giant, family-sized warning bell in my head. Elle left the room, and Yvette glided around the counter and guided me by slipping her dainty arm through mine to a bedroom that was like the church of all bedrooms. Huge bed, lush carpets, a recliner in one corner, skylights overhead that let the sun dribble in, fountain sprawled across one wall, and water sliding silently over the surface of a huge, rough slab of black granite. I realized my mouth was hanging open. We tried to create a space to match what we had learned about your taste in color, structure, and lighting, told me as she left the doorway and cruised to the middle of the room. So you're saying this is my bedroom? I sputtered in disbelief. The cost of the room alone was probably more than a whole condo in my building in L.A. Yvette crossed further in the room and opened an opaque glass door. Yes, sir. We've gathered wardrobe and also in line with what we think you'll find most fitting. I walked to the open door and looked inside the walk-in closet. It looked almost too much like my closet at home, save for the fact that it was 3 times as comprehensive when it came to the suits and formal wear, right down to the glossy leather shoes. Yvette entered the closet and pulled a white, semi-Asian style suit from the rack and said to me, Yes, this will do nicely for your meeting. What, a bat suit? I joked. Yvette was not amused. She rolled her eyes. You have to get dressed, and we've a schedule to keep. I took the suit as she walked out of the closet. I undressed, noticing that my suit from the party reeked of sweat and alcohol and was wrinkled terribly. The suit Yvette had pulled for me fit like a dream, and the material was almost too soft to believe. I took a look at myself in a mirror in the bedroom and was astonished to see that the bruise from being punched out was hardly noticeable, despite how it felt. I again took in the vast bedroom. It was perfect, down to the sheets on the bed and the shape of the lamps. It was both impressive and terrifying to think that people I've never met could put together a fantasy living space for me. I was looking at the fountain, fiddling with the collar of my tailored suit when Yvette entered the room again. She immediately approached me, and with her feminine fingers she tucked and folded and buttoned the collar. Thanks, I said, still trying to figure out. So you're what, like my servant? Yvette smoothed out the shoulders of my jacket as she answered, checking the fit of the suit. Something like that, sir. And what would that make me exactly? I pried. Important, sir, she said, her voice rising with pride a little. Huh. I can't say I didn't have this almost exact fantasy since I don't know when. Oh, that's right, forever. But when it happens, it's all a bit much to take in, and I won't lie, the idea of being suddenly and inexplicably important and powerful didn't sound bad at all. Yvette pulled her own smartphone from her pocket and glanced at it. We have to go, sir. You're expected. If this whole surrealist series of events had made any sense, I would have expected an elevator ride to the lobby of an overly ornate building and a limousine waiting. There was an elevator, but we only took it down what felt like a couple of floors, which I found odd considering the elevator had a pair of upholstered leather chairs in it. Yvette took the lead, and I followed her out into what I can only explain as a white and glass hallway. We walked for about 50 yards, and then she turned into a small alcove where a receptionist sat at a desk of white glass. She had on a wireless telephone earpiece and was chatting away in what sounded like Russian. As soon as we approached, she stopped and smiled at Yvette. They exchanged a few phrases in French, and then Yvette motioned to me to follow her again. I smiled at the receptionist as we left the desk. Yvette pulled us to a stop in front of a glass door and then again checked me over. You should have shaved, sir. I reflexively felt my chin, surprised to find almost a week's worth of stubble sprouting. Sorry, I didn't realize I needed to look my best when preparing for a mysterious meeting after being unconscious and having breakfast prepared by a pretty girl and then putting on a suit that cost more than my college education. Yvette rolled her eyes again. Must you always do that? Do what? Try to make jokes, she frowned. I gambled. Yes, I must. It's just my nature, lovely. She shook her head. Americans. She checked her watch and then opened the door, pushing me through first. The room was dominated by a large blue crystal table ringed by white chairs and silver lamps. I saw Elle sitting on one side with a digital tablet on the table in front of her. On the opposite side of the table, a black man in a gray suit, not dissimilar from my own. His face was neutral, but the corners of his eyes and mouth showed age lines of a man who was good-natured and liked to smile and laugh. As I approached, he stood and extended a hand. Mr. Bueren, hello. My name is Liu. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. His accent was vaguely Australian or British, but not keenly one or the other. I would later learn it was in fact South African. I shook his hand firmly. Hello, Lou. Quite the place you got here. We both sat down. Elle picked up her tablet along with a stylus. Lou spoke first, smiling broadly. No doubt you're wondering what you're doing here and who we are. Questions are natural, and I'll start by saying you, Mr. Bueren, are a rare find. In a day and age when people are driven not by passions and genuine ambition, you are carving your own way in the world. That's why you are here. Elle marked her tablet, and the blue table lost all color. In place of a solid blue, the table became a screen displaying images of my artwork all the way back to freshman year college and Life Drawing 101. I've recognized every single one as my own. As an artist, every piece you do is special in its own way, and they're impossible to forget. Lou traced his finger over the table, the images growing and shrinking as his touch passed over each one. Line and shape and color are powerful, Mr. Bueren. My mouth again acted on some, liberal application of grab orange can be a doozy, especially if you don't stretch first. I was surprised when Lou laughed and looked me in the eye and smiling. You've got a quick wit on you, Mr. Bueren. I like it. That's a good thing. I'd hate for you to start disliking me now, I answered, tried to keep my tone skeptical, but I'm not sure I still pulled it off. Lou breathed a chuckle and nodded a little. He kept gesturing through the images on the table. As I was saying, you are unique as an artist, he started. Your work, to the untrained eye, is fairly typical, and aside from your own personal styling, which I personally think is reminiscent of both the best comic book artist and has roots in revisionist color theory. He thumbed through a few more of my pieces on his display table and stopped at a painting I had done, one of my homegrown characters for a comic book idea I had had. The piece was entitled Vengeful Grace, and it was one of my most striking works. A single heroic warrior leaping through the air, sword in hand, striking down a dark figure. The lighting was warm and saturating, the shadows hard and cold. The lines and curvature were a combination of sharp angles and smooth arcs. I had spent about 3 weeks poring over the piece. It was my second favorite work ever. Lou smiled when he looked up from Vengeful Grace, and he spun the image around so I could see it right side up. This one is a major factor in what you're doing here. Puzzled, I replied, Why? I love that one, a lot. I've been turned down selling the original at an art show in Denver 3 years ago, but what's your interest in it? Lou smiled slightly, and he gestured to Elle, who, using the tablet, faded out my artwork on the table and brought up what I can only describe as a combination of maps, psychedelic 3D artwork, and calligraphic memo pad. Bright points of light swirled among the framework of flowing and elegant lines, shadows of something intangible huddled here and there, giving the image a wholly unnatural feel. Characters which I couldn't place to any written language I'd ever seen anywhere stood out in short phrases, caressing the contours of the line work, but incorporating the points of light and shadow. It was eerily beautiful, but the undeniable fact that I could not understand it made it difficult to appreciate. So, remember those tacky but clever Magic Eye posters that spread like a short-lived rash around the mid-90s? They looked like a math student attempt to finger paint with precision, but hidden in the outward visual trash was a third, seemingly three-dimensional image almost leaping from the frame. So imagine that, except the visual trash is the most beautiful abstract art piece you've ever conceived, and the result puts a proverbial finger on your brain and starts tapping the theme song to the A-Team. Then you might have some idea of what I was looking at. I leaned forward and stood up, putting myself right above the table. My eyes raced to take in the imagery, and I was speechless. No pithy comeback, no smart remark, no cliched, jaded attitude. I was at a loss for what to say. The best I could manage after long seconds was, "What is this?" Lou walked around the table, placing a strong hand on my shoulder, and he pulled me to face him. I tore my eyes away from the image. His eyes were piercing and aquiline. "Since you are an intelligent man, Mr. Bueren, I'll do my best to explain." "Thanks," I said. "You have probably heard scientists and mathematicians say for decades, or rather centuries, that mathematics is the only true universal language." He began as we walked out of the conference room, but not the way I'd come in. "Sure, I saw contact," I answered. Elle followed us as we entered another long hallway. "No jokes, please, sir," Elle urged. "Lighten up," Lou said to her, and then continued to explain. "Let's just say they were wrong." "Okay, let's say that, but what's that got to do with yours truly?" I said, feeling a bit of my composure return. Well, let's say that the most intelligent minds of our civilization thought they had tapped a way to measure, record, and understand every last thing in the universe. Numbers and graphs, formulas and equations, and all the other seemingly logical tripe were in truth as valuable a skill as phrenology, Lou finished. I thought about it for a second, and then as I arched an eyebrow, anticipating my response, I pulled her aside and asked, "Oh, what's phrenology?" She rolled her eyes and quietly said, "The science of understanding the human personality with psyche and measuring the shape and bumps of the skull. Was dismissed as quackery more than a century ago." "Ah, of course it is," I said. I turned back to Lou. "So you're saying everything we think we know about really anything is like, what, a man born blind trying to understand color?" He laughed out loud and clapped me on the shoulder. "Ha! I knew you'd get it." We kept walking down the hallway, and as we came to a set of doors, which we walked through, the morning sun hit my eyes with a flash for just a second. And when it blinked quickly to help my eyes adjust, I looked out across a huge balcony of black basalt masonry and brass railings, and an infinity pool trickled along one whole edge of the balcony, and a bar, an actual bar, taps, glasses, bottles, the works, dominated the other side. The side open to the horizon showed a skyline I'd have found unfamiliar were it not for one landmark. Less than a mile away, the Eiffel Tower gleamed in the late morning sun. I'm not sure what tone I used, somewhere between surprise, disbelief, and anger. "You brought me to Paris?"